I would remove the shame of failure because the thing that holds people back is they talk like, yeah, we're really good at failure. I ask people all the time, who has a great relationship with failure? Nobody raises their hand. I'm like, well, this is imperative.
Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome back. Disruption is often seen as a challenge to overcome. But what if it's the key to unlocking growth, innovation, and meaningful change? How can leaders embrace disruption to lead with resilience and humanity? Today, we're thrilled to explore this with Charlene Li, a New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and advisor renowned for helping leaders thrive in times of transformation. From her book, The Disruption Mindset, to her latest Winning with Generative AI, Charlene empowers leaders to turn disruption into opportunity while staying grounded in empathy and purpose. Let's dive in and welcome Charlene Li. Hi, Charlene. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bruce, good to see you.
For those of you who don't know, Charlene and I go way back. We actually started, or parts of our career, we were at Forrester Research being researchers together. So it's always great to have an old friend come and join us.
So good to be here.
Now, you've had a successful career as a researcher, as we started together, advisor and author. How would you summarize your professional story?
I like to say I came, I saw, and I disrupted. So I came out of business school in 1993 from Harvard Business School and went into newspapers. That's not something most people do. And the reason is because I saw the internet was coming and that it was going to disrupt newspapers. So I was running towards this new coming disruption. And I helped put newspapers online. And after that, I went to Forrester Research where we were working together. And it was such a great experience because I could come and cover an area, but then I could shift my coverage area depending on what the new disruption was. So I started with internet marketing and advertising, then moved to search because that was coming up, and then social media, and then wrote a book on social media, started my own disruptive analyst firm, and I continue to do this. So I think disruption is the through line through my entire professional life.
Great. Charlene Li, the disruptor. Sounds like we should make a movie out of that, but it probably has, I would think of it with guns and all that. It's probably not the disruption you would do. As you reflect on your career, so you've done a lot of things in this disruptor mode. What skills have you relied on that have been particularly valuable?
I would say empathy. And in particular, empathy for the problems that leaders in the organizations are facing. Because if I'm going to be able to be disruptive, then I have to anticipate what are the areas of pain points they're going to have. And I've always said that it's about people. Even though I've talked about the latest technology, it's always about the people and it's never about the technology. And I try to really look at the humanity of the situation because in the end, this is about transformation and it's not companies and technologies that transform, it's people who transform. So empathy and a focus on people.
I love that. I always described sort of what my role was always centered on people and then looking at them in different environments, right? And as you say, you can't succeed with anything, certainly a disruption to change them without focusing on people. Love that. So you've worked with leaders and you talk about the change and driving disruption. Can you share a pivotal moment from your career where you witnessed a leader who was successfully embracing the disruption around them?
Yeah, I remember having this conversation with a CEO right after I published my first book, Groundswell, which is about how companies can use social media. And he came up to me and said, I love the book. I get it. I had to be open. I'd be out there and engaging with people. But I have just one question. How open do I need to be? Which is a really darn good question. And that was really interesting to me because it was a pivotal moment when I realized I needed to shift from just writing about the technologies and their impact to thinking about the leadership issues because it was the leaders who are driving these transformations. And if they didn't know how to transform, then they were never going to lead a transformation of their organization. So they had to personally go through these things. And so I realized that leaders are very ill-equipped for transformation. They're fantastic leaders day in, day out. They can lead change, but we aren't called upon to lead transformations. So that was a pivotal moment. And I think a sea change in how I approached all of the transformations I looked at from going forward from then. It's always been from the perspective of that leader leading a transformation that was going to be extremely difficult.
It's interesting. So as I reflect, I had similar background when I think about my job right before coming to Forrester, where I was COO of a startup where we were building an internet-based brokerage system. Now, the CEOs we were talking to had no idea what it meant to bring their brokerage online, right? We saw the technology. We knew it was going to all move online eventually, but the leaders didn't have that viewpoint. Probably similar to what you see. If you just focus on the technology, like you say, they don't necessarily have the understanding that you have about where that's going to be. So how have you learned to be able to coach leaders through the disruption if they're not necessarily prepared or see it coming in the same way you do?
Yeah, I first of all ask them to think about changes that they have made in their lives and how did they prepare for that change. It could be a career change, they're going up the ladder. It could be a personal change, like having a child. You prepare for these moments. And so I encourage them to step into disruption and change every single day, to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I happen to have my favorite mug with me today. It says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And it's something I say to them, is that if you're comfortable, then you're not doing this right. You should be comfortable being uncomfortable and being on that edge. So as a leader, you have to think about this as something that you work on all the time.
So I love that. You have to be comfortable at being uncomfortable. I go to Orange Theory, and that's sort of like what our coach is always telling us. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing enough. So similar there. And that leads into the idea of being uncomfortable, being comfortable with uncomfortable feels like it's part of your story about saying this disruption is a continuous process, right? It's you can't be uncomfortable some of the time. How can leaders cultivate a mindset that views disruption as a necessary and ongoing part of their leadership?
Well, if you think about what leaders do, leaders create change. And if you're not creating change, then you're a manager, which is fine. You're managing the status quo. But as a leader, you have to accept the fact that your job is to create change, that you're here today, you see a change and a better place where you can be in the future, and you're guiding people along that change and inspiring them to follow you to make that change happen. So this is something that you take on as a leader. You step into that void and you're telling people, this is the change we need to see. This is how we're going to get there. Or even better, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there together?
Nice, nice. So this focus on change and the disruption, right, requires bold, future-focused vision, right? As you talk about the realities of today's challenge, you got to balance them. How do you advise leaders to maintain a balance, right, of this future bold with the realities of today without losing credibility or momentum?
Well, first of all, I don't think balance is possible. I like to think of it as more harmony. Because if you're trying to maintain this artificial balance of being perfect all the time, you're going to lose that. You're going to fall off balance and feel like something's wrong here. Versus if you just say, I'm shooting for harmony here, and it doesn't mean that I'm always going to have it perfect, but I'm going to be aligned with what's really important to me. So I think a lot of it is about just being really honest with yourself and with people. To say, if you're worried about losing that credibility again, frankly, people just want you to be honest and they want you to be fair. If you're those two things, people will respect you. You will have credibility. The minute you are not honest with what's going on, I mean, you can't open yourself up and be vulnerable to say, I don't know the answer, and that's going to be okay, then that's very different. So I think of some of the best leaders out there that I've worked with, and they really, again, are able to talk about, balancing this whole idea of the vision of what they have versus realities. They're realist optimists is what I call them.
I like that, realist optimist. It's almost like when you talk about harmony, it's having the self-awareness and comfort with wherever you are and whatever you know and whatever you don't know, right? But because it sounds like when you're going through the disruption, especially on an ongoing basis, there's going to be a lot that the leader doesn't know, and they have to be able to deal with that situation.
Yeah, I think about some of the leaders I've interviewed and talked with over the years. Very few of them would say, I knew exactly what the answers were. And one person, Max Holland, who is currently the CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I mean, you think about what art does, it conserves, right? It maintains things. And he was a disruptor in the art world by looking at art from a very different perspective and saying, how do we bring more people into art? So in a highly conservative space, he was blowing things up all the time. And he would say, I have to hold that vision of what the future could look like, hold it in place until all the pieces could be there. And that allows people then to have a bit of grace and time to work through the challenges that they may be having.
So that's an interesting dynamic, right? Because we talked before about leaders who may not be able to see what disruptions are coming and how they're going to disrupt, to a leader who sounds like he saw disruption ahead of where you could possibly get. And that leads to situations, right, where if you are a leader and you're trying to disrupt too much or too fast, the organization can't keep up or fulfill your vision. Any thoughts on how a leader can sort of pace their disruption so that the rest of the organization can come along, or that the market can catch up to the disruptor's vision?
Right. And again, I think of it as a disruption quotient that each person has and that collectively an organization has, and frankly, your ecosystem. And you can't be too far ahead of what your organization is capable of doing. So it's one thing to push and pull them, like prod them, and because they're going to need that constantly. Again, the whole key here is to be just a little bit uncomfortable, but not, and I call it being stretched instead of being stressed. Two very different things. So you want to stretch people, but not stress them out in the process, because then you can sustain that pace of change and transformation over time. But I think that it's a really hard thing to do. And you can think about it as providing scaffolding or having a container that you're holding for people. But people need to feel somewhat safe, maybe not comfortable, but they do need to feel safe before they would jump in and create change for themselves and the other people in their organization.
So that's an interesting thing. Safe, but stretched. Sounds like we're coming back to notions of harmony, right? Yin and yang, sort of operating together. How do you help people feel stretched but safe simultaneously? What are some of the practices that a leader could do to make sure those two things are in harmony together?
Well, I'll give you a personal example. One of the things I like to do is to jump from high places, in particular things like waterfalls and cliffs. And so I like jumping. I like that fall of falling, that thrill of falling. And in the beginning, I would just jump off of like 5-foot high waterfalls into a pool. And then I got more confident. I'd go up to like 7 feet. And most recently, I jumped off a 40-foot cliff this summer in Hawaii. So
wow. Wait, stop there for a second. You jumped off a 40-foot cliff.
Right.
Good for you. Oh my goodness.
But I would not have been doing that, 20 years ago when I started doing this. But I will always feel safe because I will jump off a cliff that I know thousands of people have safely jumped off of before. I mean, it's never 100% safe, but I know how to fall. I know how to go into the water straight, so no part of me is flailing and gets smacked. And so what I say to people is allow people to take that first little step into the unknown. Especially if they've never done it before, you got to make it a tiny little cliff that they have to jump off of. And then you can okay, how did that feel? Okay, yeah, do it a few more times and then go up to the next one. But again, if you practice doing this every single day, you're going to get better at this very, very quickly.
Well, it's interesting because clearly one of the important things when you think about disruption is the organizational resistance that kicks in. And it sounds like one of the strategies you have for overcoming organizational resistance is to make sure that you get momentum with little steps first, right? Before, telling the organization, here's where we're going, jump in together. Do you have other strategies to overcome organizational resistance?
Yeah, I think, again, the people, there's an archetype I call the worried skeptics. They're just like, I don't know about this. I'm worried about, they've seen changes happen before, people bringing these visionary things, they don't go through or they fall apart because the details aren't there. And two things. I think, first of all, being really clear about the vision where you have, invite them to come along and dream with you. And then really, and understand how their core desires can be mapped onto that aspiration. And then the other part is do worst case scenarios, do pre-mortems, make sure you're understanding where is that skepticism. And then if you figure out what their underlying skepticism is about the entire strategy, whether you should be going on this, you can say, look, that boat has left the harbor already. You're either on this boat or you're not. Are you coming along for the ride? Because if you're not, then we're going to have a different conversation. But if it is about the way we're going to get there, how we're going to row, the direction and the path, we can talk about all those things. But are you on the boat? That's the most important question. Because if you're not, you got to get off. We can't have you on this team.
So that's an interesting thing about disruption, right? Which I think the idea that if you're committed to change, then you believe that the organization has to get there. There's no alternative to it, right? Do you see your leaders making that click, which is, I'll work with you on pacing, I'll work with you on how, but I see this world going in this direction and we have to get there, right? That sounds like what you're saying, and then you're either on board or not.
Yeah, literally, the people at Adobe, the leaders, had this saying, we're burning the boats. There's no going back. It was from a reference to Alexander the Great when he went to go invade Sparta, I think it was. He ordered the boats to be burnt, and he said we were either die and defeated, we will either sail our enemy's ships home, or we will die here trying. So there's no going back. And when you can paint it in a way like, look, this is the future. This is where our customers are going. We have to go there. Our customers are pulling us to this. Look at all the data, look at all the evidence. I know the past is beautiful, but it doesn't exist anymore. We can't go back. So what journey are we going to go on? And will you go on the one that we've decided is the one that we want to be on?
I love that metaphor of burning the boats is a great one, because the people can't rely on what they were doing in the past. We're saying that doesn't exist anymore. We have to, so you're sort of forced to do something new. You have to learn how to swim or build a better boat.
Yeah. One of the most debilitating things that people say, and when people say this in the organization, I go, oh, I know exactly what problem we have here. I ask, like, you have this thing going on. Why do you do this? Well, that's just the way we do things around here. And I go, well, why do you do it? I don't know. We just do it that way. And so there isn't this questioning, this curiosity that says, this is the way we do things. Why do we do things this way? Is there a better way? Could we be doing it better? Can we be doing it differently? Let's go try it. Maybe it doesn't work. And there is this lack of experimentation and curiosity to say, could it be better? I don't know. Let's give it a try. We may fall flat on our face and it'll be okay. We'll just go back. But maybe we'll discover something new and interesting that we can bring back.
If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We've got plenty more great stories coming your way.
Nice. So one of the things you talk about, I think you're getting at this, is a culture of disruption, right? The idea that you can create a culture of disruption. Now, what happens though if everyone in the organization is just blowing up things constantly, right? You go too far, right? And people go, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to try something new. I would imagine at some point you need some stable systems to build around. So how do you find the right sweet spot for creating a culture of disruption?
People think that highly disruptive, innovative companies, there's just chaos everywhere, right? Like, oh, there's just people just throwing things out in the wall. They're actually incredibly well run, well organized. Everyone knows what they're doing. They can answer the three questions really clearly. Who is our future customer? Where is our future going to be? Number two, what's our strategy to get from today to tomorrow? And number three, very importantly, what is my personal role in making that strategy a success? So when you are coordinated, when everybody knows exactly where we're heading, again, it's not always perfect, but directionally, we know this is the future we're fighting for. We all agree on this. I saw this when I was, again, I do briefings all the time still. And the people from LinkedIn would say to me, I'd ask them, why are you doing this? They go, well, our mission is this, our values are this, these are, and I'm like, you sound just like your CEO. It was Jeff Weiner at the time. And he had this habit of always repeating at the beginning of every single meeting, our mission is this, our values are this is how we're going to get there. And somebody asked him a very interesting question. When are you going to stop doing this, Jeff? Because we're sick of it. And he said something very wise. I'll stop doing it when people stop looking surprised. And the reality is people forget. They forget why we're here. They get heads down on their job and they look around like, oh yeah, that's why we're here. We're working for our customers. This is the future we're working for. And they get more focused on what they do. So you have to repeat this constantly as a leader.
Well, it's interesting because we talked about disruption, throwing away, burning the boats. At the same time, we talk about consistency of mission and values, right? So maybe that's another harmony, right? How do we actually disrupt what we're doing while still keeping in mind where we're heading and why we're doing it?
Everything around you is changing. What things are not? And the things that are not are your beliefs, your values, your mission, all those things. Everything else can change, but you need a bedrock. And that's why these organizations are able to disrupt themselves over and over again. They know where their future customer is. They have really strong leadership with an idea of what it means to be a transformational leader. And they have a rock solid culture made up of certain beliefs and behaviors that tie everybody together so they can always go back to that culture because that isn't changing. Everything else around them is changing, but they are aligned. They are sitting there in harmony, not always in balance, but in harmony. And they can disagree like you've never seen before. I've seen some of the strongest, most vehement arguments, and then they leave the room like, so what, are we going to play softball tonight? Are we going to, are you up for that hike this weekend? And they were just going at it. That's culture. And that allows you to have that friction in the organization that creates all of that yummy innovation that otherwise exists.
It's funny. I think to some degree our society has lost a lot of that capability to vehemently disagree, but to still have the personal interactions on the side when you're done. So hopefully we see more of that, not only in business and organizations, but in society at large.
Yeah, one of the things I've been working on lately is especially this whole idea of belonging and inclusion. And when you feel like you belong, when you belong to the tribe, then you can argue. I mean, when you're in a tribe, it means that no matter what you do, unless you're violating trust or something, it says you're safe. It says you're safe to bring forward a dissenting point of view and you will be respected for that. You're actually expected to say something, to speak up when you see something is going amiss. So it's expected, it's respected, and you feel safe doing this. That takes a lot of work. And when we think about, I know DEI is out of favor these days, but the one thing that I think is this need for humans to belong. That has always been and that will always be there. And so if we can make it safe for people, we make them feel like you belong here. Your opinions matter. Your perspective is important. You have agency. You always had the power in you to speak up. Now speak up.
I love that. I agree. Belonging is critical. And the notion, I've been doing a lot of work on sort of how society is changing and what groups people see them belonging to. It's interesting. I think this is another element that can actually overcome a little bit lack of belonging, and that's the notion of trust, right? If I don't belong to the group, don't feel like I belong to the group, but I trust, I can have some of the same sort of positive behaviors with other people, as long as, because I think both of those things give you the sense of safety that you were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah. Again, trust, belonging, these are all really powerful values that exist in organizations that are highly disruptive. The three beliefs I found were openness. So there's a lot of information and open and transparency. There's a strong sense of agency, again, that each person can act as an owner. And then there's a bias for action, that you'll never have all the information to make a perfect decision. So you may as well get to it, because once you make a decision, you'll be in a different place and you can look back and say, was that the right decision or not? But at least you have made some decisions and decided, oh yeah, that worked, or that was a terrible idea. But you'll be in a different place than where you were before. And sometimes it's backwards, sometimes it's forward or sideways, but you'll just get a different perspective and learn a lot more. So disruptive leaders are very, very good at failing and not getting emotional and feeling shame about it.
So talking about disruption and potential failing, it seems like that's a great transition into AI. It's sort of hard to have a discussion nowadays about disruption without bringing AI. And you've actually done a lot of work on it. Your latest book, Winning with Generative AI, you outline how leaders can navigate the volatility of AI-driven disruption. Why don't you give our listeners a sense of what your advice is around that type of AI disruption?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, the hardest part about generative AI is that it's constantly changing. And even when you think you dial it down, it shows up with an answer that is just made up. So to your point before, how do you trust it? How do you give it the keys to your kingdom, to your organization, and trust that it's going to do the work correctly? And also, because it's changing, how do you know that the investments you make in people and training, in the technology, in the data, how do you know it's still going to be good? It's going to be valid 3 months versus 3 years from now. So the book really lays out, how do you win with generative AI? How do you put together a strategy that can be future-proofed? And there are specific techniques that my co-author, Katja Welsh, have decided to put into the book. She has deep experience as a chief AI officer. We've done a ton of research with companies, and there are some very specific techniques that are very unique to this moment in time. And in particular, the ability to have a strategy written in pencil, basically, that you can go and review every single quarter. That is key, because things change so quickly. You need to have an agile strategy, not just agile operations or an agile development process, but an agile strategy that takes into account all the things that are changing constantly.
I'll bet you I know one piece of advice that you have for people disrupting with AI. You have to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Isn't that
Exactly.
like that? That's like in a lot of AI all the way, right?
Right. I just created an AI avatar. It's 100% generated me, full video, voice, and everything. And I can give it scripts that are AI generated based on my knowledge base. And it's the weirdest thing. It's the ultimate uncanny valley to see yourself saying words that you have never said before. It's really uncomfortable. And yet I see the power of that, the ability to create courses that are highly customized to every person's situation and their learning styles. But I had to give up the need to be the authority, that there's no other Charlene Li that could be out there that could be better than me. I hope my AI does a better job than me in terms of delivering these customized courses. I could never do that at scale, but AI can.
So wouldn't this be an amazing time for me to reveal that you are in fact not Charlene, but an avatar of Charlene who's joined us? But I'm not going to do that. You really are Charlene, and it's been great. But I have a few closing questions before I let you go. So this one is broadly, and I ask these of like all my guests. What's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
I think it's the ability to ask great questions. because your ability to know all the answers, and that's why people usually get promoted into leadership positions, is that you come up with the better answers than anyone else does, so you get the job. You will not have any more answers. This is completely new, unknown space. And so being able to ask really great questions that your team, that will lead your team to the right answer, is going to be a really important skill.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? I think leaders are oftentimes bred to think they have to be the ones with the answers. You're saying, no, you have to be the ones with the good questions. I love it. Love it. All right. Second question. If you could wave a magic wand, and I'm empowering you only for this moment, it's a skill that I'm worried getting out in the world. But for this moment, I'm giving you a magic wand and immediately make things change. What would you do to make organizations more humanity-centric?
I would remove the shame of failure.
Awesome.
Because the thing that holds people back is they talk like, yeah, we're really good at failure. I ask people all the time, who has a great relationship with failure? Nobody raises their hand. I'm like, well, this is imperative. That how do we think about failure? Do we accept it? Are we okay with it? And one organization said, we don't fail anymore. I'm like, what do you mean you don't fail? And they said, we tried everything. We tried to fail fast, to celebrate failure. Nothing worked. It just was awful. So they decided never to fail. And the way they did is that anytime they saw somebody come on like, oh, I feel really bad, I failed. Like, wait, why are you feeling bad? So they addressed the emotional side of failure. The shame that we felt, that we let people down, that despite trying our best, it didn't work out. And the key thing to remember here is if you tried your best, how could you have ever done anything more? That's all we can expect of you. And why do you feel shame around that? If you take that away, the energy, the politics that go behind that, dealing with that shame would all go away, and instead be focused on creating that value, creating the solutions for our customers, making sure that we're connecting and in harmony with each other. It'd be such a different world. If I could borrow that magic wand, I would sure love to do that.
You know, I'm thinking about keeping you with the magic wand and just let you go wild with it. So that was great. My last question, what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners?
If your palms aren't a little bit sweaty, if your stomach isn't churning a little bit, again, that little bit of discomfort, you're not doing it right.
Awesome.
You should be feeling a little crazy. And then you're like, okay, yeah, this is where I want to be. This is exactly where I need to be.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Charlene. It's been great having you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you found my conversation with Charlene Li insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed it, I'd love you to share it with others and subscribe to the podcast for more great discussions. Now let's dive in the Aftershow, a segment where I reflect on the key takeaways from the episode and share additional thoughts and insights. Welcome to the Aftershow, where I'm excited to share some thoughts about my discussion with Charlene Li. Today, we dove into the world of disruption with Charlene, a true pioneer in helping leaders embrace change with empathy and purpose. Let's unpack a few highlights and add some broader context to what we heard. Charlene's career story was fascinating. She saw the internet's potential to disrupt newspapers in the 1990s and ran towards that challenge. Her mantra, I came, I saw, I disrupted, reflects a mindset that views disruption not as an obstacle, but as a pathway to growth. This aligns with the idea that transformational leaders don't just react to change. They anticipate it and use it as a springboard for innovation. A great example of this mindset is action in Netflix's pivot from DVDs to streaming, a bold move that embraced inevitable industry shifts. One of Charlene's central points was the critical role of empathy in leadership, especially during times of transformation. She emphasized that technology doesn't drive change, people do. By understanding the challenges and aspirations of their teams, leaders can create environments where transformation becomes possible. This reminds me of a quote by Simon Sinek, who said, leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. Empathy ensures that disruption isn't just about breaking things, It's about building better futures. Charlene's favorite mantra, life begins at the end of your comfort zone, was amazing. It underscores the importance of embracing discomfort as a catalyst for growth. Leaders need to prepare for and practice navigating the unknown. Just as Charlene's waterfall jumping story illustrated, this approach, starting with small, manageable steps before scaling up, before taking that 40-foot jump, mirrors the concept of psychological safety in teams, where incremental risks lead to collective confidence and progress. A standout insight for me from the conversation was Charlene's distinction between stretching and stressing organizations. Leaders need to push their teams to innovate while providing the support and clarity, or as she called, scaffolding, to ensure people feel safe enough to take risks. This balance between challenge and support is crucial for sustaining long-term transformation. Research from Harvard Business Review supports this, noting that leaders who foster trust and provide clear goals significantly increase team performance during disruptive periods. Charlene also highlighted the burning the boats metaphor as a rallying cry for leaders to commit fully to change. By leaving no option to retreat, teams are forced to focus on forward momentum. This reminded me of Adobe's bold decision to transition fully to a subscription model, a move that initially faced resistance but ultimately redefined the company's success. During our discussion, Charlene also shared how belonging and trust are essential for fostering a culture of disruption. When individuals feel a sense of belonging, they are more likely to speak up, challenge the status quo, and contribute innovative ideas. Trust reinforces this by creating an environment where people feel safe to take risks. As Charlene pointed out, belonging doesn't mean everyone agrees all the time. It means disagreements are welcome and respected because of shared values and mutual trust. This dynamic allows teams to thrive even amidst the friction of innovation, turning conflict into a driver of progress. As Charlene so aptly put it, leaders must create a culture of openness, agency, and action. They should align their teams with a shared mission and values that act as a bedrock during times of change. And above all, they must get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's where true leadership and transformation happen. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting, positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.